You remember the warnings, don't you? Check your candy. Don't eat anything unwrapped. Stay away from houses with their lights on. Don't take homemade treats from strangers. For 50 years, Halloween has come with a whisper of danger, a cultural anxiety so embedded in the American psyche that we don't even question it anymore. Parents inspect Snicker bars under lamplight. Hospitals offer free x-rays of trick-or-treat bags. Schools send home flyers warning about razor blades hidden in apples and cyanide slipped into pixie sticks. We were taught to fear the stranger in the dark, the house at the end of the block, the man who answers the door with a smile that lingers too long. But here's the thing about that fear. It didn't evolve naturally. It wasn't born from a pattern of crimes or a series of tragedies that finally forced us to wake up. It came from one specific night, one specific house, one specific man who understood that the best way to hide a murder is to make everyone believe a monster did it. This is Buried Truths, a podcast about cases that didn't fit the narrative. Cases that were ignored, dismissed, or quietly buried because the truth was too uncomfortable, too inconvenient, or too dangerous to tell. I'm your host, Philip Roberts, and today we're going back to October 31st, 1974, to a rainy night in Deer Park, Texas. To a father, a son, and a piece of candy that would change Halloween forever. This is the story of the man who killed Halloween. And the truth, the monster was never a stranger at all. Deer Park, Texas, October 31st, 1974. It's not a great night for trick-or-treating. The weather is miserable. Cold, drizzling rain that makes the jack-o'-lanterns flicker and die on porches across the neighborhood. But Ronald Clark O'Brien isn't about to let bad weather ruin his children's Halloween. He's a devoted father, a deacon at his local Baptist church, a friendly, well-liked optician who waves to neighbors and helps little old ladies cross the street. At least, that's the version of Ronald O'Brien that everyone in Deer Park knows. Tonight, he's taking his two kids, 8-year-old Timothy and 5-year-old Elizabeth, out with a family friend and her two children. They pile into cars and head to Pasadena, a nearby neighborhood with better Halloween decorations and hopefully better candy. The night proceeds normally. Kids run from house to house, their plastic pumpkin buckets filling with Tootsie Rolls and Mary Janes. O'Brien trails behind them, chatting with the other parents, keeping an eye on the group. And then, according to O'Brien, something happens. They approach a house with its lights off. Most trick-or-treaters would skip it. Everyone knows the rule. No lights means no candy. But O'Brien walks up to the door anyway. The children hang back on the sidewalk. When he returns, he's carrying 5 giant pixie sticks, the jumbo kind, 21 inches long, stuffed with powder sugar in bright striped plastic tubes. The kids are thrilled. O'Brien hands them out, 1 to Timothy, 1 to Elizabeth, and 3 to the other children in the group, including a 10-year-old boy named Whitney Parker and his sister. A man with a hairy arm gave them to me, O'Brien tells the group. He didn't want to come all the way to the door in the rain. It's odd, but it's Halloween, and strange things happen on Halloween. They continue trick-or-treating. Back home around 9:30 p.m., the O'Brien family sorts through the night's haul. Timothy is tired, ready for bed, but he wants to eat something first. He reaches for the giant pixie stick. His father helps him open it. The powder is caked and hard to pour, almost like it's been tampered with. But Timothy manages to get some in his mouth. Within seconds, he starts complaining. His stomach hurts. He's thirsty. He's scared. Ronald O'Brien, the concerned father, rushes to get him water. By the time Timothy drinks it, he's vomiting, convulsing. His mother, Deneen, screams for an ambulance, but it's already too late. Timothy O'Brien dies in his father's arms on the way to the hospital. Cause of death? Cyanide poisoning. Enough to kill 3 grown men, packed into a piece of Halloween candy. And just like that, every parent's worst nightmare becomes real. Within hours, the story is everywhere. Child dies from poisoned Halloween candy. Halloween horror in Deer Park. Madman targets trick-or-treaters. The Pasadena Police Department swings into action. They issue a public warning. Check your children's candy. Throw away anything that looks tampered with. Panic spreads like wildfire. Parents across Houston dump entire bags of Halloween candy in the trash. Hospitals set up screening stations. But the police have a more immediate problem. There are 4 children out there who received the same poison pixie stick. They have to find them before they eat the candy. By sheer luck, sheer unbelievable luck, none of the other children had eaten theirs yet. Whitney Parker's father had confiscated his because he'd eaten too much candy already. Elizabeth O'Brien had been too tired to open hers. The other children's parents hadn't let them dig into their bags yet. 4 lives saved by chance. Now the question becomes, who did this? Ronald O'Brien is the obvious starting point. He's the only adult who knows where the candy came from. So investigators sit down with him, and he tells them the story. The house, the dark porch, the hairy arm reaching out with the candy. He even takes them to the house, points it out. That one, right there. Detectives knock on the door. A man named Courtney Melvin answers. He's an air traffic controller at Houston's airport, and he has an airtight alibi. He was at work all night. His neighbors confirm it. He wasn't home. He didn't hand out candy. He didn't even turn his porch light on. Ronald O'Brien's story is already falling apart. Detectives start digging into O'Brien's life, and what they find is a man drowning in debt. He owes $100,000, a staggering amount in 1974. He's been fired from job after job for stealing, for lying, for failing to show up. His wife doesn't even know how bad it's gotten. He's been hiding bills, dodging creditors, writing bad checks. And then, just weeks before Halloween, Ronald O'Brien does something unusual. He takes out life insurance policies on both of his children. Big policies, $20,000 each, with an additional $10,000 accidental death rider. He does it through multiple companies, so no single insurer will get suspicious. He forges his wife's signature on some of the documents. He doesn't tell her. When investigators ask him about the policies, O'Brien has an answer ready. I'm a good father. I wanted to make sure my kids were protected. But there's more. In the weeks leading up to Halloween, O'Brien had been asking questions, strange questions. He'd called a chemical supply company asking about purchasing cyanide. He had inquired at a pharmacy about poisonous substances. He'd even asked a colleague at work, casually, just making conversation, how much cyanide it would take to kill a person. The colleague thought it was weird, but didn't report it. It was just Ron being Ron. A little odd, a little awkward, but harmless. Except he wasn't harmless. Forensic analysis of the pixie sticks revealed something damning. The powder inside isn't just cyanide. It's been carefully prepared. Someone had opened the tubes, removed some of the sugar, mixed in the poison, resealed them with staples, and even tried to smooth out the creases to make them look untouched. This wasn't a random act. This was premeditated, meticulous, planned. And here's the most chilling part. The part that gets buried in all the sensational headlines about Halloween horror. Ronald O'Bryan didn't just poison his own son. He poisoned 4 other children to cover his tracks. He gave out 5 poisoned pixie sticks, knowing that if multiple children got sick or died, it would look like the work of a madman, a stranger, some psychopath prowling the neighborhood, looking to kill at random. Timothy's death would be a tragedy, yes, but it would be an anonymous tragedy. One among many. O'Bryan would collect the insurance money, pay off his debts, and no one would ever suspect him. 4 other children were supposed to die so Ronald O'Bryan could cash a check. Think about that for a second. Really let that sink in. He wasn't a grieving father. He was a man who looked at Halloween, a night of innocence and joy, and saw an opportunity. Ronald O'Bryan's trial begins in May 1975. The prosecution's case is overwhelming. They present the life insurance policies, the phone calls about cyanide, the timeline that doesn't add up, the forensic evidence, the fact that O'Bryan is the only person who could have distributed the poisoned candy. The defense tries to argue that O'Bryan is being railroaded, that the police are looking for an easy answer and ignoring other possibilities. Maybe there was a stranger. Maybe someone targeted the O'Bryan family specifically, but the jury doesn't buy it. The evidence is too clear. The motive is too obvious. On June 3rd, 1975, Ronald Clark O'Bryan is found guilty of capital murder. He's sentenced to death. In interviews after the conviction, O'Bryan continues to maintain his innocence. He insists there was a man with a hairy arm. He insists he loved his son. He insists this is all a terrible mistake. No one believes him. Even his own wife, who stood by him initially, eventually divorces him and tells reporters she thinks he did it. For 9 years, O'Bryan sits on death row. He files appeal after appeal. He grants interviews. He writes letters proclaiming his innocence. On March 31st, 1984, just shy of 10 years after Timothy's death, Ronald O'Bryan is executed by lethal injection at the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. As prison officials prepare the injection, a crowd gathers outside. Some are there to protest the death penalty, but others, most others, are there to celebrate. They chant over and over, "Trick or treat, trick or treat, trick or treat." Ronald O'Bryan's last meal is a simple one: steak, French fries, and peach cobbler. His last words are a continued declaration of innocence. At 12:48 a.m., he's pronounced dead. The man who killed Halloween is gone, but the myth he created, that lives on. Here's what most people don't know about the poisoned Halloween candy panic. It's almost entirely fictional. Researchers have spent decades looking for documented cases of strangers poisoning or sabotaging Halloween candy with the intent to harm children. And you know what they found? Virtually nothing. There are no confirmed cases, 0, of a stranger randomly killing or seriously injuring a child with poisoned Halloween candy. The few incidents that do exist are either hoaxes, accidents, or, like Timothy O'Bryan's case, familial murders disguised as random attacks. In 1985, a University of Delaware professor named Joel Best published a study examining Halloween sadism. Claims from 1958 to 1984. He investigated 76 alleged cases. 76. And in every single one, the story fell apart. Some were complete fabrications, children lying about finding razor blades to get attention. Some were parents discovering minor defects in candy and assuming the worst. Some were cases of children getting sick from eating too much candy, not from poison. The only real cases of Halloween poisoning, they were committed by family members, like Ronald O'Brien. And yet, the myth persists. 50 years later, we're still checking candy, still warning children about strangers, still treating Halloween like a minefield of hidden dangers. Why? Because Ronald O'Brien's crime was so perfectly disguised to exploit our deepest fears. He understood something fundamentally about human psychology. We're terrified of random violence, of senseless evil, of the idea that someone could hurt our children for no reason at all. A father murdering his own son for insurance money? That's horrible, but it's comprehensible. It's a motive we can understand, even if we find it reprehensible. But a stranger lurking in the shadows, poisoning candy just to watch children die? That's the stuff of nightmares. And once that narrative takes root, once the media runs with it, once the panic spreads, it doesn't matter that it's not true. The fear becomes real. The myth becomes fact. The media coverage of Timothy O'Brien's
Good
death
evening.
focused
Today's
almost
top story
entirely
local
on the
authorities
method
informed us that
rather
Timothy
than the
O'Brien's death was
perpetrator.
the cause of poisoned
Poisoned
Halloween candy.
Halloween candy. Check your children's treats. The danger lurking in your neighborhood, even after O'Brien was arrested, tried, and convicted. The headlines continued to warn about Halloween sadness and trick-or-treat terror. The narrative was too good to let go. And in the years that followed, the narrative calcified into cultural gospel. The poisoned candy scare became a staple of parenting advice in columns, local news segments, and school safety presentations. It didn't matter that it wasn't true. It felt true, and sometimes that's all it takes. Ronald O'Brien's greatest crime wasn't just murdering his son. It was weaponizing our fear to create a myth that would outlive him by generations. I think about Timothy O'Brien sometimes. 8 years old, excited about Halloween, probably dressed as a superhero or a cowboy, or whatever it was that kids loved in 1974. He had no idea that the man holding his hand, the man who was supposed to protect him, was the one who wanted him dead. And I think about the other kids, Whitney Parker and his sister, Elizabeth O'Brien, the kids who survived by pure chance. They carry that with them forever. The knowledge that someone, Timothy's own father, was willing to kill them to cover up a murder. Ronald O'Brien didn't just destroy his own family. He left scars on an entire community, an entire generation. And he gave us a ghost story that we still tell ourselves every October. We check the candy. We avoid the houses with no lights. We warn our children about strangers. But we rarely talk about the real lesson of this case. The greatest danger isn't the stranger in the dark. It's the person sitting at your dinner table. The person who knows your routines, your vulnerabilities, your trust. It's the father who sees his child not as a human being, but as a $30,000 payout. That's the truth we've buried beneath 50 years of Halloween safety pins and urban legends. That's the truth that makes us uncomfortable, because it's easier to fear the monster we don't know than to acknowledge the one we do. Ronald O'Brien died in 1984, but the myth he created, the fear he weaponized, lives on. Every October we resurrect it, we teach it to our children. We perpetuate it in the name of Satan. And every October, Timothy O'Brien's story gets buried a little deeper. Until now. You've been listening to Buried Truths, a podcast about cases that don't fit the narrative. I'm your host, Philip Roberts, and if this episode made you think twice about the stories we tell ourselves, the myths we believe without question, then I've done my job. Next time, we're talking about Kinney Genovese and the 38 witnesses who supposedly watched her die without lifting a finger, except they didn't. The New York Times made it up, and that lie changed how we think about human nature forever. For more information, case files, and source materials, check out titdusa.com. Subscribe to Buried Truths on Apple Podcasts or follow us on Patreon for free merchandise and early access to episodes. Until next time, keep digging.